Well, welcome back. This is Sean Noble.
I'm Chris Clements.
This is Light Beer, Dark Money. Today, we are super excited and honored to have Ann Coulter as our guest. She's calling in. Actually, we don't know where she's calling in from, but a secret location, I suppose, Ann?
Yes, as always. Like Dick Cheney in the underground bunker.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. I can't wait to be out there in person.
And so let's jump right into that. You're headed here to Phoenix, and tell us about what you're going to do.
I'm speaking at Arizona State University, which sounds like an interesting place. I love Arizona. I've lived in Arizona. And it'll be next Tuesday night at 7 p.m., sponsored by TPUSA and the Leadership Institute. They want me to talk about immigration, big issue, not only in Arizona, but in the entire country. And I hope any Republicans running for office going forward, talk about little else but immigration and crime.
Those are obviously big issues. So you're going to be here on October 19th, 7 p.m., ASU. That sounds like it's going to be, well, it'll be interesting because you chuckled when you mentioned ASU. That's all my alma mater, but there have obviously been some things that have happened there in the recent past, especially last week. I think, and you tweeted about this. There was a standoff in the multicultural center, I think.
Yes, that was pretty great.
We'll have to post that on our website. But so immigration, the border crisis, crime, all tied together. How is it that we've gotten to this point? I mean, with Biden coming into office, obviously that's part of it. But what are the driving factors, do you think?
Well, it's been a 50-year campaign by the Democratic Party to change the electorate. They were having a lot of trouble, the Democrats, getting elected, getting the votes of Americans. So, at some point they just decided, okay, fine, you won't vote for us, America? We're bringing in new voters. And oh my gosh, have they. This has been a huge campaign and out in the open. Roy Teixeira, the big Democratic consultant in Texas, talked about Obama's election in 2008, I guess it was. He said it was George McGovern's revenge, and attributed it to the 1965 Immigration Act. He's been predicting forever that with the combination of some of the Democratic Party stalwarts, academics, divorcees, the poor, and now we throw in millions upon millions of immigrants, we'll have an insuperable majority. So, they've been openly talking about it. Republicans have been whistling past the graveyard. I mean, this is what led to the rather unexpected victory of Donald Trump in 2016. He's an utterly implausible candidate. For many personal reasons, he was correctly made fun of, but he was running on issues that no Republican would run on. Back in, I think, 2013, Trump was tweeting to Republicans who were they're constantly considering amnesties because their donors want more voters, or rather more cheap labor. Democrats want the voters, Republicans want the cheap labor. And Trump was tweeting back in 2013, Republicans, this is suicide for your party. Well, it is suicide for the party. I was just thinking about this. I was thinking of sending a snarky tweet to the Federalist Society. I don't know if you saw this story about a law student at Yale who was in both the Federalist Society, a second-year law student, very prestigious law school, lots of Supreme Court justices come from Yale, and he's apparently an actual American Indian, a Cherokee, unlike, say, Elizabeth Warren. So he
Right.
belongs to the American Indian, I guess they call it Native American, which doesn't make any sense. The Native Americans were were the Europeans who arrived here. There was no America until they got here. But forget about the factual inaccuracy of that. The Native American group and the Federalist Society at Yale, and he sent this, I think, kind of funny email. Talking about a meeting they were having, I don't know, somebody's dorm room or something, and it's a jokey email, and he's referring to the room as their trap house, which I guess is a word for, or a phrase, which I've sort of vaguely heard it, but for like a drug house or something. So, okay, it's funny. These are law students. And he's called before the diversity coordinator, who's a Muslim immigrant who went to Stony Brook College, which I would not stress in that way. I'm not a liberal. I'm not a snob. But you have this sociology major from Stony Brook, not a very impressive college, bossing around, haranguing a second-year law student for a funny email. This is what we've come to. These people have ridiculous majors. They're incapable of work anyplace else. And so what do? They become diversity counselors, right, and go around bossing around. This guy will probably be on a fancy federal appellate court someday, but he's being bossed around by someone who probably has half his IQ. This is what's going on at Yale. And anyway, I was thinking about this because so many of the Federalist Society members, and I love the Federal Society. Oh my gosh, they're the only ones who got anything done during the Trump administration. But for years, I've talked to many of them and their leadership, and the immigrants, they'll work harder than Americans, and diversity is our strength. And I just feel like, showing up on their doorstep. Hey, how's this immigration thing working out for you guys?
Right.
You got your members being, threatened with suspension at Yale because Nassim Ahmed or whatever is, Nassim something, I forget what his last name is, a prestigious graduate of Stony Brook, is upset about a humorous email he sent.
Yeah.
This is working out great. And look at the Virginia election. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. Good luck to the Republican. I can't stand Terry McAuliffe. But Virginia used to be, as California was, a sort of stalwart Republican state. And now every few years, Republicans get really excited. Oh, Nick Gillespie's running, and he's running such a great campaign, and he ran this ad and that ad. And what's happened to Virginia? It has flipped blue entirely because of immigration. It is the effects of immigration on the Republican Party are constantly lied about. It's always attributed to something else. So in Virginia, they're all, it's the government workers moving in. Oh, for Pete's sake, how many government workers are there? Most of the government workers in Virginia are military government workers. They've got a big naval base there. But the number of foreign-born in the last 20 years has gone from about 1 in 100 to 1 in 7.
Yeah.
And it takes immigrants. I mean, we can win them over eventually, but anyone coming to this country is by definition coming from a less free country. Well, so it takes a while to get used to things that are just ingrained in multi-generation Americans, the ideas of things like free speech.
Right.
And
right.
Not free speech with an asterisk unless I'm triggered. No, free speech is it used to be something the left was passionate about. That was when they were pushing, pornography and communism. Now that they see it as a great way to crack down on Trump supporters, they're not so enthusiastic about it. But the idea of free speech, and I don't need to tell you guys this, is that, even heinous ideas, even ugly, awful, and wrong ideas, you have the right to say it. The idea is that in a battle of ideas, the truth will emerge. I think you see the opposite of that happening right now with COVID, for example, with public health authorities. I'm a huge vaccine supporter, but with health authorities lying to us about prior infection. the strong immunity you get from prior infection. Fauci he's become the new Lance Ito. He just wants to be on TV. I don't know if you saw, he announced a few days ago, yes, you will be allowed to go trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
Screw you, Anthony Fauci.
Exactly. Let's back up one second. Let's go back, because I definitely want to cover the COVID thing. But on the immigration thing, I hear what you're saying about how it's definitely hurting the Republican Party. The question I have, and this is one I've been thinking through over the last few months, because it seems to me that the hard leftward lurch of the Democrat Party to basically socialism has to be good for us, with immigrants coming from countries that are less free. I mean, it seems to me the long term, if the Democrats continue to go down this path, may be doing us a favor and doing themselves exactly the opposite of what they think they're doing with this open borders policy.
I would say keep hoping, but I don't see that happening.
I'm ever the optimist.
Well, but you do see a little bit of what's happening down in Texas, right?
I really love, and I'm not saying this ironically or hyperbolically, I genuinely love, right-wing Hispanics, right-wing Muslims, right-wing Asians. And I think I know a lot of them. They're worth their weight in gold, because when you got them on your right-wing blacks, African Americans, no, they're always so much better than the average, traditional white American Republican, because they've had to overcome so much. Their community, this idea that you're voting against your ethnic group if you vote for the Republican Party. No black person, no Hispanic just rolls into being a Republican because, oh yeah, well, my whole family's Republican. No. You've thought about it.
Right.
Having said that, we Republicans have never been able to get more than high 60s, or a little more than 30% of Asian, Hispanic. We can barely get 10% of the black vote. The only swing voters in the country are white voters. Both parties know that. But the Democrats can't get them, so they just denounce white people. What I can't understand is why Republicans are so embarrassed about having white people vote for them. Every election is determined by tiny movements in the white vote. So, yes, I think eventually we're going to get a lot of immigrants, and the ones we already have are magnificent, wonderful human beings, but don't count on getting a majority anytime soon, because unless you're getting 51%, you are losing.
Well, I think that to some degree, obviously, there's going to be some time lapse in the sense of how long it takes for them
like
to
100 years.
Well, I don't know if it'll be 100 years.
That's the history of immigrants. It takes 100 years. They vote for the Democrats for 100 years, and then after 100 years, they start splitting their vote.
So we can move up the time frame.
Process.
Yeah.
Well, I do think.
But anyway, that's not the main point. Even if you are a Democrat and think it's great that AOC and her ilk will be running the country, I think the main point is we have an American culture. It is the one that gleams and shines and works the best. And when you bring in enormous numbers of people, not small numbers, and treat it as a hate crime to assimilate them, you will be changing the country culturally, economically. Who's getting hurt the most by all this low-wage immigration? Low-wage immigration, because that's what the Republican donors want, and the Democrats like low-wage immigrants because they want poor people to vote for them, and they'll offer them more and more government services. The Republican-Democrat advantage on this is really only relevant to explain why both political parties keep ignoring the American people. But we do have a culture to protect, and as the two, I think maybe just one examples I just gave, the idea of free speech, the idea of the individual right to bear arms. These are very unusual in the world at large, and it takes a while to get used to them. The idea of free speech is obviously counterintuitive, or we wouldn't have 500 Supreme Court cases asserting it.
Right.
Obviously, people are constantly trying to shut one another up and say, no, this is outrageous. You can't say this. This is defamatory. This is ugly. This is this, that, or the other thing. And the Supreme Court for 200 years keeps coming in and saying, no, we have a First Amendment. That's obviously a counterintuitive position. And it's one thing when you bring in, as we used to, small numbers of immigrants and we assimilate them and they learn what it's like to be an American, and we're going to have this boisterous, crazy free speech, and you're going to have an individual right to bear arms. Those are just two examples. I'm going to the first two amendments in the Constitution. It takes a while to get used to that. If you bring in lots of people who stay within their country's group, in neighborhoods, in restaurants, they're not going to get assimilated into the American way of life, and it will change it. And finally, it is hurting the least among us, this mass low-wage immigration. It is the working class that's having their wages driven down into the ground. And that is great for the money bags, for the Koch brothers, for the donors to the Republican Party. Oh my gosh, they have so much cheap labor. They have no idea that many Americans raise their own children, make their own beds, cook their own food. No idea whatsoever. So it's good for them, and they're destroying the country in the process.
So switching to COVID, the thing on COVID that has made me the most concerned is just the astounding. Well, I mean, there's this kind of counterintuitive. The liberals who are really pushing government mandates of vaccines and mask mandates, those kinds of things. I mean, they're playing right into big pharma's hands, which I just find astounding.
Yes.
And I don't understand.
And if only we could all speak honestly about this. I mean, I really think this has harmed the cause of, quote, public health immeasurably, and I wonder if we will ever trust public health authorities again when they are openly lying to us. And wow, you want a breeding ground for conspiracy theories. I mean, as I said before, I am wildly pro-vaccine, especially if you're I don't know, 40s, definitely 50 or older. 85% of the deaths have been in people over 50, very few in younger people. A younger, healthy person who isn't overweight. If I were advising the person, you might want to wait until you get a few years older if you're sure you have no comorbidities, because prior infection creates stronger, longer-lasting, better immunity. There has been study after study on this, and yet there are no passports for prior infection.
Right.
So that's
I've been arguing
the
that a
biggest
lot.
lie right there. Right there. People, and you're seeing it around the country right now, speaking of discrimination against the working class. Oh, we used to celebrate all of these frontline workers, the nurses, the food delivery men, the people doing jobs for, computer warriors who could work remotely from home. Yeah, well, the working class was delivering your food all that time.
Exactly.
And they were the ones who were the most likely to actually contract COVID.
And did.
But they were young and healthy, and they lived, and now they have better immunity than the computer warriors do. But the computer warriors say, no, you have to get a vaccine. When it's the workers who have stronger immunity than the vaccinated do. And simply the refusal to admit the power of prior infection. It's not only sleazy, discriminatory, harmful to the working class, but it is a lie. It is a lie about the science. The science is prior infection. And nobody knew this at first, but there have been innumerable studies now. And another indisputable at this point fact of science is that masks don't work to stop COVID. There's been study after study after study, and the CDC keeps pointing to a barber shop in Missouri, I think it is. Isn't it a beauty shop? And their big study is at some beauty shop, there were two beauticians cutting women's hair, and they found out later, they weren't doing this as an experiment, they found out later that they had COVID when they were cutting the ladies' hair. But everybody was wearing masks, and nobody got COVID of their clients, the two beauticians themselves got COVID. As a million people have pointed out, this isn't a randomized controlled study. We don't know that if any of them would have gotten COVID if nobody had been wearing masks.
Right.
And when they do randomized controlled studies, the hallmark of modern science, every study that's been done, and there are at least a half dozen of them now, I haven't checked in the last week, probably more, shows that masks do nothing for COVID. They stop other things. I'm again, I'm actually, not only am I pro-vaccine, I'm pro-masks, just not for COVID. Long before COVID came along, I was somewhat notorious for flying, at least in flu season. Once I'd get in my seat, I'd put my mask on, and it absolutely cut down on the colds I got. Now, I think the reason for that, now that I know a little more about masks, was that I touch my face a lot when I'm sitting on a plane reading. And I notice it when I'm wearing a mask because that's how the germs transfer, which is why I'm also anti-handshaking. I hope we end that disgusting practice with COVID. But I'm not someone who's anti-mask in all cases. Yes, of course it works for some things, but it doesn't work for COVID. And this virtue signaling of people wearing masks, for the public cameras, and then they go meet privately and they all take their masks off. This is why you have anti-vaxxers among otherwise intelligent people.
Right.
Because the whole thing just seems like a scam to them. And that is harmful because some people absolutely should be getting vaccines.
Right. But then it's a broader issue when you start talking about children, and masking of small children and
you're overweight or sorry, go ahead.
No, just kids who have had COVID and now they want to inject them with this new lesser dose vaccine that hasn't been thoroughly tested. And so to your point, Ann, if your kids have had COVID, they're under 12 or under whatever age, I don't care what age they are, they have natural immunity, and now the government wants to order them to get a vaccine, which could make them sick.
Right. Well,
it's crazy.
It is crazy.
Yes, there are side effects to everything you take. I'm kind of a nut on this. I avoid even taking aspirin when I have a headache or Tylenol or something unless it's unbearable. I figure my body is trying to tell me something. Maybe I need to drink more water or lay down or something. Every medicine has some side effect. You probably saw the surprise ruling this week. They used to say older people should take baby aspirin every day.
Right.
Now they're saying, no, don't do it. Mistake. We were wrong for the last 20 years. Any medicine you take is going to have some side effects. So at that point, you have to weigh the risks. And we're actually kind of lucky with COVID. Obviously, it's a terrible thing for anyone to die, even if they're only dying 6 months before they would have otherwise died. But, oh my gosh, we're lucky that COVID mostly hits older people. And I say that because very few people who have died, you're not sitting around saying, oh, wow, he was taken down in his prime.
Yeah,
what
exactly.
could he have done? No, but younger people get sick, recover, and then have fantastic immunity.
Right.
Yeah, on this show, we've called it the quickening. So basically anything that has been ailing you for a good long time, it just speeds it up, whether it's heart disease or obesity or diabetes or anything like that. And the entire approach of not protecting the vulnerable and creating a one size fits all approach for everybody is just has led to the lack of trust that you're describing.
Yes, which is very dangerous because I think, and I've harangued some of my friends into, well, I don't know if I've succeeded in all cases, but into getting the vaccine. If you're over 50, get the vaccine, unless you've had it.
Right.
Yeah.
Before you go, we know you've got a tight time frame. Talk to us about what Republicans can do to be prepared for 2022 and 2024. In part because I think the Democrat overreach on the spending and the government takeover of everything has got to make the environment good for Republicans going into the next election cycle.
This could be absolutely huge, but I think Republicans should be, as a rule of thumb, talking about nothing but immigration, crime, and the woke stuff going on at the schools.
Yeah.
The critical race theory, racism every place, under every bed, and the transgender stuff, but mostly immigration and crime, immigration and crime, immigration and crime. I mean, the spending and taxes, I think that goes in one ear and out another. Republicans, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's shockingly new levels are being pushed right now under this progressive Democratic Party. But I just don't think it hits most people because they've heard Republicans and Democrats bickering back and forth their entire lives about that. Immigration and crime hits people where they live. They can see what's going on. I go back to the implausible candidate, reality TV star, tacky Aravist, Donald Trump, getting more votes in Republican primary history. Why? Because he ran on immigration.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been giving speeches around the country for many years, and I've never seen such a divide between Washington and the people as on immigration. So any politician who runs on protecting the people who already live here, who, by the way, obviously include immigrants here. They moved to America. For some reason, they didn't move to Ecuador, Somalia, Haiti. They wanted to come to America. So let's save America for everyone. That, I think, that's an issue that isn't going to go away for a long time. And right now, I mean, crime is absolutely through the roof, and it is directly a result of Democratic policies. They are on the side of criminals. Crime destroys everything. You can't have life when crime is through the roof. You can't go to your neighborhood stores. You can't mingle outside. You can't, let your kids play on the street. It destroys lives. Crime is everything, and the Democrats are pedal to the metal releasing criminals right now.
What and just a quick pivot. I don't know if you saw the President Trump's statement yesterday, which would have been October 13th, since this will release tomorrow. But if we don't solve the presidential election fraud of 2020, parentheses, which we have thoroughly and conclusively documented, Republicans will not be voting in 2022 or 24. It is the single most important thing for Republicans to do. Kind of looking backwards, I think.
He's Miss Havisham in Great Expectations. He will never shut up about this. And no, we've moved on. Should have done something about the COVID election rules before the election.
Yep. Yes.
Tweeting things out doesn't count. And no, he's going to. This is the one. Trump is the one reason Republicans may not do well, and this is a rather important time for Republicans to defeat the newly energized progressive Democratic Party. It's more than that. He's telling his voters, his people, not to vote unless they're running on election fraud. No, he is utterly narcissistic, not particularly bright. He's trying to do to the entire country what he did in Georgia, which cost us 2 Senate seats. We wouldn't even be talking about any of this if it weren't for Trump going down to Georgia and saying, "Oh, it's rigged. Maybe you shouldn't even vote." And attacking Republicans in that state, elected statewide Republicans. No, we really need Trump to go away now. I feel sorry for any Republican running for office because they can't speak plainly about it the way I just did.
Right.
He's our Al Sharpton. Well, the Democrats have to go kiss Sharpton's ring every 4 years. Why? Because neither political party wants to lose any voters. We're allowed to have nut voters the same way the Democrats are. We're allowed to have idiot voters the same way the Democrats are. So you don't want to tick off anyone in the party. The Democrats interpret this as, oh, we're all beholden to Trump. Yeah, okay, you guys are beholden to Sharpton. You guys are beholden to George Soros. But he's going to be a huge problem for the Republican Party.
Yeah. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Tell our listeners how they can follow you, and again, give us an update on when you're coming out.
Well, definitely follow me on Twitter. That's where all the news is. I'm at blue checkmark at Ann Coulter on Twitter. You can give up many of your other news sources because so many journalists follow me and repeat it. It's a fantastic Twitter feed. And I'm going to be at Arizona State University Next Tuesday, 7 p.m. I just tweeted the Eventbrite link, where you can sign up, where you can register to come.
Great.
Awesome. Well,
Thanks
thank you
so
so
much.
much for being here.